The highway department called my grandmother's farm surplus land like it was an old tire left beside the road. They said the new bypass would cut clean across our lower pasture, take the spring house, and erase the fence line my family had honored for 3 generations. I was sitting in my wheelchair on the porch when Deputy Director Marcus Hale handed me the notice and told me not to make this harder than it had to be. But he didn't know about the quilt folded in my cedar chest. My grandmother stitched that quilt in 1958, long before county computers, long before satellite maps, long before men in press shirts started deciding what land was worth keeping. Everybody thought it was just fabric. They were wrong. Because hidden in those faded squares was a county line nobody had bothered to remember. My name is Clara Whitcomb, and I was 46 years old the morning the state truck rolled up my gravel drive with 2 orange flags tied to its bumper. The farm sat outside Bryan County, Kentucky, where the blacktop narrowed after the Baptist church and the mailboxes leaned like tired men. My grandmother used to call our place Willow Thread Farm, because the creek bent around the south pasture like a loose stitch. Most folks just called it that old Whitcomb land, as if Mage made something less alive. I had been running it from a wheelchair for 7 years. A grain elevator accident had taken the use of my legs, but not my hands, not my head, and certainly not my memory. I still knew which field held water after a March rain. I still knew where the limestone shelf rose under the hay meadow. I still knew that the lower pasture, the one the highway department wanted, was not just open land. It held our spring house, our blackberry line, and the old sycamore where my grandmother had buried 3 coffee cans full of seed money during the hard years. Marcus Hale stepped out of the truck like he had practiced looking sorry without actually feeling it. He wore a gray department jacket, polished boots, and the kind of expression people use when they have already decided the conversation is over. Behind him came a younger woman with a tablet and a surveyor's vest. She would not meet my eyes. She looked at my chair first, then at the porch ramp, then at the folded notice in Marcus's hand. "Ms. Whitcomb," Marcus said, "we've completed the surplus review. This portion of land falls outside the productive boundary recognized by current county records." I let that sentence sit between us. "Productive boundary," I repeated. He nodded, relieved I had used his words and not my own. "The bypass project will improve emergency access, reduce school bus delays, and bring long-term development value to this side of the county. My grandmother's spring house is on that land." His mouth tightened. "The structure is not listed as protected. The fence line is older than your department. The digital parcel map does not support that." That was the first time he said it like a door closing. Digital parcel map. As if a screen could remember frost. As if a database could know where a woman planted peach trees after her husband died. As if land only became real when someone in an office colored it blue. I asked him if he had checked the old county plats. He said they had checked what was required. I asked if he had walked the creek bend. He said the engineers had reviewed aerial imagery. I asked if he knew why the south fence made a crooked turn near the sycamore. He glanced at the younger woman, then back at me. "Ms. Whitcomb, I understand this is emotional." That word did something to me. Emotional. Not informed, not experienced, not rooted, just emotional. I folded my hands in my lap so he would not see them shake. Then I looked past him toward the pasture, where orange flags had already been pushed into soil my grandmother once worked barefoot. "What happens if I refuse?" I asked. Marcus lowered his voice, like kindness had finally arrived, though it was only warning dressed up in manners. "Then the department proceeds without your cooperation." And that was when I realized they had not come to ask. They had come to erase. After Marcus left, the farm went quiet in a way I did not trust. The dust from his truck hung over the lane. soft and pale, then settled on the mailbox my grandfather had welded from scrap steel. I sat on the porch with the notice across my knees, reading the same line until the words blurred. Surplus land subject to acquisition. Surplus. I had heard that word before. After the accident, when the grain company lawyer called me functionally limited in front of a room full of men who smelled like coffee and paper. I had learned then that polite words could cut deeper than cruel ones because they came wrapped in procedure. My neighbor, Ellis Rowan, drove over before noon. He was 72, narrow as a fence rail, and moved with the careful pride of a man who had outlived 3 tractors and 2 bad knees. "I saw orange flags," he said from the bottom of my ramp. I held up the notice. He climbed the ramp slowly, took the paper, and read it without speaking. When he finished, his jaw worked like he was chewing a bitter seed. "They're calling your south pasture surplus. That's what the map says." Ellis looked toward the creek bend, then the map's lying. I almost smiled, but it did not reach far. Maps don't lie. Ellis. People leave things off them. He gave me a sharp look. "That sounds like your grandmother." It did. Grandma Ruth had never trusted anything that could be changed with a pen by a man who had never walked the land. She kept tax receipts in flour tins, seed records in hymnals, and property notes in the margins of church bulletins. When I was little, she made me memorize fence corners the way other children memorized state capitals. "White oak stump, then flat stone, then creek split," she would say. And I would repeat it back while she stitched beside the window. That memory sent a small pull through me. The quilt. Not because I thought it could save anything. At that moment, it was only the shape of my grandmother's hands in my mind. I wheeled inside and went to the back bedroom, where the cedar chest sat under a framed photograph of Grandma Ruth standing in a bean field with a hoe over her shoulder. The chest lid was heavy, and my arms trembled before it opened. Inside were feed sack dresses, yellowed letters, a tobacco tin, and the folded quilt wrapped in muslin. I had not touched it since the funeral. The fabric smelled faintly of cedar and dust. Its colors had faded indigo, rust red, cream, and green, but the stitching still held. Each square was different. Some showed stars, some showed crooked roads, some held tiny triangles that looked random, unless you knew my grandmother never made anything random in her life. Ellis stood in the doorway, hat in hand. "I always thought that was a pretty thing," he said. So did I. But then I spread it across my kitchen table. One corner square showed a blue line bending around 3 brown blocks. Beside it, stitched in black thread, were 8 tiny knots. I stared at those knots. 8. The old south fence had 8 stone posts before the creek turn. My breath caught so hard it hurt. Ellis leaned closer. "Clara." I did not answer right away, because suddenly the quilt did not look like memory. It looked like instructions. I did not sleep that night. The quilt stayed on the kitchen table beneath the yellow light, spread flat between 2 mugs of coffee gone cold. I rolled around it slow, tracing the stitched lines with one finger, careful not to snag the thread. The longer I looked, the less it seemed like decoration. Grandma Ruth had used green cloth for pasture, blue for water, brown for buildings, cream for roads. At first, that sounded like imagination trying to rescue me from fear. But then the pattern repeated. Every blue line on that quilt bent where water truly bent. Every brown block sat where an old structure had once stood. The spring house, the tobacco shed, the corn crib that burned before I was born. By 2 in the morning, I had pulled out my laptop and opened the county's online parcel map. The department's modern boundary cut my south pasture like a knife. Clean, straight, confident, too confident. I zoomed in until the pixels softened. The digital line ignored the creek bend entirely. It ran through the old sycamore, across the springhouse path, and over the place where the 8 stone posts used to stand. 8 knots. I pushed back from the table and rubbed my eyes. Before the accident, before the chair, before I came home for good, I had worked 3 years in Lexington doing GIS mapping for a private land use firm. Most people in Bryer County did not know that. They remembered me as Ruth Whitcomb's granddaughter, then as the woman who got hurt at the elevator, then as the farmer in the wheelchair who kept to herself. They did not know I could read a bad map the way a mechanic hears a bad engine. The next morning, I called the county records office. A clerk named Denise answered with the tired kindness of someone who had spent 20 years telling people the same thing twice. "I need archived plats before the 1964 highway correction," I said. There was a pause. "You mean the scanned parcel records?" "No. Earlier than that? Hand-drawn if you have them. Road Commission overlays, creek surveys, anything tied to Willow Thread Farm or the Whitcomb tract." Another pause. "Most folks don't ask for those. Most folks aren't about to lose their spring house." She sighed, but not unkindly. "Come in if you can. Some of that never got digitized." Those words stayed with me. Never got digitized. By noon, Ellis had borrowed his nephew's van with the wheelchair lift, and we drove into town. I hated needing help with the ramp. I hated the way strangers watched Ellis lock my chair into place like I was luggage instead of a woman with an appointment. That was my flaw, though I would not have called it that then. I had mistaken independence for refusing every hand offered. At the records office, Denise brought out 2 gray boxes and 1 cracked leather ledger. "Careful," she said. "These are older than half the courthouse." I opened the ledger and felt something shift in my chest. There, in fading ink, was a 1958 boundary note. South line follows natural creek bend and 8 stone markers to county edge. My hands went still. Grandma had not stitched a quilt. She had preserved a witness. Denise would not let me take the ledger home, and I did not blame her. Old paper has a dignity. Modern paper lacks. It carries the weight of hands that are no longer here to defend what they wrote. So I asked for certified copies, and while the machine warmed up behind the counter, I sat there with the quilt folded across my lap, feeling for the first time that my grandmother had not left me alone. Ellis leaned close and whispered, "You've got them now." I wanted to believe him. But I had lived long enough to know truth did not win just because it existed. Truth needed witnesses. Truth needed timing. Truth needed someone powerful enough to stop a machine already moving downhill. By the next afternoon, orange flags had multiplied along the pasture. A crew had arrived with tripods, paint cans, and white stakes. They were not digging yet, but they were marking, like digging was already promised. One young man sprayed a bright line across the grass near the springhouse path, and the color looked obscene against the green. I rolled down the packed dirt trail as far as the front wheels would take me. The ground was uneven from last week's rain, and twice the chair caught in ruts deep enough to stop me cold. I hated that Ellis had to push from behind. I hated that the crew saw it. Marcus Hale stood beside a state SUV, phone pressed to his ear. When he saw me, his expression folded into practiced patience. "Ms. Whitcomb," he said after ending the call, "this is an active survey area. It's my pasture. It is under acquisition review. See what is semi." I handed him the certified copy from the 1958 ledger. "Then review this." He took it with 2 fingers, like history might stain his gloves. His eyes moved over the page. For 1 second, just one. The confidence left his face. Then the tablet woman from before stepped up beside him. Her name tag read, Leanne Porter. She looked from the ledger copy to the quilt on my lap. "Where did you get this?" she asked softly. "County Records Office." Marcus cleared his throat. "This note does not automatically override the current parcel system." "No," I said, "but it tells you your current parcel system may be wrong." The crew had stopped working now. Men in orange vests pretended not to listen while listening with their whole bodies. Marcus lowered his voice. "You need to understand, Ms. Whitcomb. Projects of this size cannot be delayed by sentimental materials." There it was again. Sentimental. I unfolded the quilt across my knees. The wind lifted one corner, and Ellis caught it before it slipped. My grandmother stitched the creek bend, the 8 stone markers, and the South County edge into this pattern, I said. That ledger confirms the same line. Marcus looked toward the crew, then back at me. "A quilt is not a survey." "No," I said, "but neither is a bad digital map." Leanne's mouth tightened like she was holding back agreement. Marcus handed the copy back. "Send it through the proper appeal channel." "How long does that take?" 30 to 60 days. "And when does grading begin?" He did not answer. That silence told me everything. The machines were coming before the truth had a chance to be heard. That evening, I did something I had avoided for years. I asked for help. Not from a lawyer? Not yet. Lawyers cost money the farm did not have, and the highway department knew that. They counted on people getting tired, getting scared, getting buried under forms until surrender started to feel like common sense. I called Maribel Cross first. She taught history at the high school and had once spent a whole summer cataloging cemetery stones across Bryan County. Grandma Ruth used to say Maribel could make a dead courthouse file sit up and confess. When I explained the quilt, the ledger, and the creek bend, she went quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "Clara, your grandmother may have stitched a memory map." What? Quilts were sometimes used to preserve routes, family lines, field divisions, church histories. Not formal surveys. No, but memory systems. If hers matches county records, that matters. It didn't matter to Marcus Hale. Then we make it matter to someone else. By morning, my kitchen looked like a records room after a windstorm. Maribel brought yearbooks, old road petitions, and a magnifying glass. Ellis brought a shoebox of photographs his late wife had taken at church picnics in the 1970s. Denise from the records office, on her lunch break and clearly pretending she was not officially involved, brought photocopies of 2 road commission minutes from 1964. Nobody said it out loud, but I felt it. The farm was no longer just mine to defend. Still, letting people into my house, into my fear, made my chest tight. Every time Maribel moved a paper, I wanted to correct her. Every time Ellis adjusted the quilt, I wanted to tell him not to touch it. I had spent 7 years proving I could manage alone, and here I was, needing 3 people to unfold what my grandmother had left behind. Maribel must have seen it on my face. "Clara," she said gently, "help does not make the truth weaker." I looked down at my hands. It makes me feel like I'm losing more than land. No one answered too quickly. That was kindness. By afternoon, we found the second match. In one of Ellis's photographs, Grandma Ruth stood beside the south fence during a church harvest supper. Behind her were the 8 stone posts, visible as pale shapes against the grass. The creek bent behind them exactly where the quilt's blue thread bent. Maribel lined the photo beside the quilt, then beside the 1958 ledger copy. 3 witnesses, she whispered. But the strongest witness came near dusk. Denise called from the courthouse basement. "You need to hear this," she said. Her voice was low, excited and afraid at the same time. I found an unindexed road correction file from 1964. It says the county line was redrawn for maintenance purposes only. Not ownership. Not parcel transfer. Maintenance only. I closed my eyes. Maintenance only. That meant the highway department's map had mistaken a road service boundary for a property boundary. A clerical shortcut had hardened into official truth over 60 years. I asked Denise to certify it. She hesitated. "Clara, this is going to embarrass people." I looked through the window at the orange flags glowing in the pasture. "Good," I said. "Maybe embarrassment is cheaper than bulldozers." The next morning, I sent Marcus Hale everything. Certified ledger page, road correction file, Ellis's photograph, a scanned image of the quilt with my own GIS overlay drawn on top in thin red lines. I marked the creek bend, the 8 stone posts, the old south fence, and the difference between a maintenance boundary and a property boundary. Then I waited. Waiting is harder when you know the machines are close. By 10 o'clock, 2 graders had parked near the pasture entrance. Their yellow bodies sat behind the temporary barrier like patient animals. Men walked around them with clipboards. One laughed at something another said, and the sound carried across the field as if the whole thing was ordinary. At 11, Marcus called. "I received your materials," he said. His voice sounded different, less polished. And I asked, "There are some inconsistencies we need to review internally." Inconsistencies are what you call it when a map steals land politely. He did not answer right away. Finally, he said, "I'm ordering a temporary pause on grading for 48 hours. 48 hours. Not victory, not even belief. Just a pause small enough to disappear if someone above him got impatient. "Thank you," I said, though the words tasted thin. Before he hung up, I heard papers shift on his end. Then his voice dropped. "Ms. Whitcomb, did you create that overlay yourself?" "Yes." "You have mapping experience." 3 years of GIS work in Lexington before I came home. Another silence. This one was not dismissal. It was recalculation. "I didn't know that," he said. "You didn't ask." The line went quiet long enough for me to picture him in some clean office, staring at a quilt on one screen and a county map on another, realizing the woman in the wheelchair had not been sentimental. She had been accurate. But the pause did not last. That afternoon, the County Development Committee released a statement saying the bypass remained on schedule pending routine document review. Routine. That word landed hard because it told people not to look too closely. By evening, a local reporter named Jonah Pike called my house. "Ms. Whitcomb," he said, "I heard you're claiming a quilt changes the county line." "I'm not claiming anything like that." "That's what people are saying." "Then people are making a family record sound foolish because it's easier than admitting a department map may be wrong." He went quiet. "Can I come see it?" I almost said no. The old instinct rose in me again. Keep strangers out. Keep the quilt safe. Keep pain private. But then I looked at Maribel, who was standing by the stove with her arms crossed, watching me like she already knew which choice would cost me more. If I kept the truth in my kitchen, the graders would win outside. "Come tomorrow morning," I said, "and bring a camera that respects old women's work." The next day, Jonah photographed the quilt spread across my table. He photographed my grandmother's stitches beside the certified ledger. He photographed Ellis pointing to the 8 stone posts in the old harvest supper picture. When he asked what I wanted from the highway department, I did not say money. I said, I want them to admit land remembers more than their computer does. That quote ran online before sunset. By dark, half the county knew about Grandma Ruth's quilt, and Marcus Hale could no longer keep his doubts private. By sunrise, the story had grown teeth. Jonah's article was shared by teachers, retired farmers, church ladies, surveyors, and people who had not thought about county lines once in their lives until a quilt made them curious. The headline was simple. Farmer says, Grandmother's quilt reveals boundary error in bypass plan. Under it was a photograph of my hands resting on the faded cloth. Not my chair. My hands. I appreciated that more than Jonah knew. By 9, trucks began slowing near the farm lane. Some people only looked. Some waved. One woman left a jar of peach preserves on the porch with a note that said, My mama quilted too. Don't let them laugh. The highway department did not laugh anymore. At 10:30, Marcus Hale arrived without the survey crew. No orange flags tied to his bumper this time. Just his gray jacket, a folder under one arm, and the tired face of a man who had slept poorly. Leanne Porter came with him, carrying a rolled map tube. Ellis stood beside my ramp. Maribel stood near the porch rail. Jonah waited by his car with his camera lowered, not filming yet. Marcus looked at all of them, then at me. Ms. Whitcomb, he said, may we review the south line on site? There was no apology in it. Not yet. But there was something new. Permission. I nodded. Ellis helped me down the ramp, and we moved slowly toward the pasture. The ground fought my chair in every low place. Once, the front wheels sank into a soft patch, and before I could snap at anyone, Marcus stepped forward. Then he stopped. He remembered, maybe, the way I hated being handled without being asked. Would you like assistance? He said. The question was small. It mattered. I swallowed my pride. Yes? From the left side? Don't pull the frame. He did exactly as I said. That was the first honest thing he did for me. At the old sycamore, Leanne unrolled her map across the hood of the SUV. My GIS overlay was printed beside the department's parcel image, and on top of both was the 1964 maintenance correction file. Leanne pointed with a pencil. The modern system appears to have absorbed the maintenance boundary as if it were a deeded property line. Marcus's jaw tightened. Appears. Leanne looked up. Her voice stayed respectful, but it did not bend. Sir, it did. That was when I saw his private doubt become public weight. We walked the line as best we could. Ellis found the first stone post half buried under honeysuckle. Maribel found the second. By the fourth, neighbors had gathered along the fence. By the sixth, Jonah was filming. By the eighth, Leanne's hands were shaking. The 8th stone stood near the creek bend, cracked but upright, exactly where Grandma Ruth's black thread knot said it would be. Marcus stared at it for a long time. No one spoke. The creek moved behind us, soft over limestone, as if it had been waiting 60 years for somebody to listen. Finally, Marcus took off his cap. I need to contact the director, he said. I looked at the orange flags in my pasture. No, I said. First you need to pull those. Marcus did not pull the flags himself. That would have been too simple, too clean, and real correction rarely arrives that neatly. Instead, he stood near the SUV with his phone to his ear, while the whole pasture watched him lose an argument with people above him. I could hear only pieces. Yes, sir. I understand the schedule. No, sir. This is not a social media issue. Yes, sir. I am standing at the marker now. Then he turned away from everyone, but not far enough to hide his face. His shoulders lowered, his free hand pressed against his forehead. For the first time, I wondered what fear had made him so rigid. Later, Leanne told me the story quietly. Years before, Marcus had approved a small road shift after an elderly landowner begged him to spare a family cemetery. The delay cost the department money. A contractor complained. A supervisor accused him of letting emotion overrule procedure. After that, Marcus stopped trusting anything that looked like a plea. I was not ready to forgive him for what he had done to me. But I understood, a little, how a man could build a wall out of one old humiliation. When he ended the call, he walked back to the group. Jonah lifted his camera, then lowered it when I shook my head. Some moments need witnesses, some need room. Marcus looked at the 8th stone post, then at the quilt folded in my lap, then at me. Grading is suspended indefinitely, he said. A murmur moved through the neighbors. That is not enough, I said. His eyes met mine. I kept my voice steady. Those flags told every man on that crew my land was already gone. They told my neighbors your map mattered more than my grandmother's memory. If you are wrong, then be wrong out loud. Leanne looked down at the map tube. Marcus took a breath that seemed to scrape him on the way in. You're right. 2 words. Quiet ones. But they changed the air. He turned to the crew chief. Remove every acquisition marker from the Whitcomb South pasture. Photograph each removal. No equipment enters this tract without my written clearance. The crew chief blinked. Today. Now. One by one, the orange flags came up. The first made a soft ripping sound as it left the dirt. I did not expect that sound to affect me. But it did. By the 3rd flag, Maribel was crying. By the 5th, Ellis had taken off his hat. By the last one near the Springhouse path, I felt my grandmother's absence so sharply that it almost felt like presence. Marcus walked toward me with the folded acquisition notice in his hand. I cannot undo the way I spoke to you, he said, but I can correct the record. He tore the notice once, then stopped. No, he said, mostly to himself. You need better than theater. He placed it back in the folder. You'll receive a formal rescission, a corrected parcel review, and reimbursement for certified records, mapping costs, and any legal consultation you choose to pursue. I looked toward the creek bend. And the county line. Leanne answered, We recommend a full historical boundary correction. Marcus nodded, at department expense. It was not a courtroom victory. No judge struck a gavel. No boardroom fell silent. Just a man finally admitting that procedure had mistaken itself for truth. And sometimes that is the louder sound. The formal rescission arrived 9 days later. It came by certified mail in a stiff white envelope with the highway department seal pressed into the corner. I opened it at the kitchen table, with the quilt folded beside my coffee and morning light falling across Grandma Ruth's stitches. The letter said the acquisition claim had been withdrawn. It said the south pasture would be removed from the bypass corridor. It said a historical boundary review had confirmed that the 1964 road maintenance correction had been misapplied in later digital parcel records. But the sentence I read 3 times was the simplest one. The Whitcomb tract remains intact. I pressed my palm flat against the paper and cried before I could stop myself. Not loud, not pretty. Just the kind of crying that comes when your body finally understands it does not have to brace anymore. A month later, Marcus Hale came back to the farm without cameras, without a crew, without Leanne, without a folder meant to intimidate me. He brought a small wooden box and stood at the bottom of my ramp until I told him he could come up. Inside the box were the 8 old stone markers, cleaned, numbered, and reset with brass plates at the county's expense. Not moved from where they belonged, just protected, so no one could mistake them again. We also corrected the public parcel map, he said. The Spring House, Creek Bend, and South Fence Line are now marked as historical reference points. I studied his face. He looked older than the first day he came. Or maybe he just looked less armored. "Why are you really here?" I asked. He took a long breath. "Because I called your evidence sentimental before I understood it, and because I mistook your wheelchair for weakness, even if I never said that out loud." That truth sat between us. I did not rush to comfort him. Forgiveness, I had learned, is not the same as making someone feel better quickly. "Finally," I said, "my grandmother used to say a crooked stitch still holds if the thread is honest." Marcus looked toward the pasture. "She sounds like someone I should have listened to sooner." "Yes," I said, "she was." The bypass was rerouted along an existing service road. It cost the department more than they wanted to admit, but less than destroying a spring house, a creek line, and a family's name in the soil. As for me, I changed too. Not all at once. People like to pretend victory fixes the person who wins it. It does not. I still hated asking for help some days. I still snapped at Ellis when he pushed my chair too fast. I still woke some mornings angry at the body I had and the life I did not. But I stopped calling help a defeat. Every spring now, Maribel brings her students to Willow Thread Farm. I show them the quilt, the ledger copy, the photograph, and the 8 stones along the creek. I tell them maps matter, records matter, technology matters. Then I tell them something that matters more. Land is not just measured by lines. It is measured by who remembered them when everyone else forgot.